wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. I'm your host, Edmond Kizito. On Spectrum tonight, the 16 days of activism. How can peace be sustained in our homes considering the high cases of domestic violence? Cases of domestic violence continue to rise each day. Looking at what is covered in the media, yet records show that many cases are not covered by the press or even reported to the authorities. Some cases have been fatal, and in many situations, children are left in lifelong pain, leading to a cycle of violence and insecure communities. Despite all the dangers related to domestic violence, many people do not quite understand its impact, and many quickly hide under culture and dominance to perpetrate the vice. Uganda now has a specific law on domestic violence. Unfortunately, it seems legislation alone cannot be an answer, since there are many circumstances and hidden causes that need to be addressed. Those campaigning against domestic violence are currently marking the 16 days of activism designed to eradicate or even at least reduce cases of domestic violence. So tonight on Spectrum, we look at the magnitude of domestic violence in Uganda, the provisions in the law, and what efforts are needed to deal with it across the board. We'll also look at the 16 days of activism and its related activities. Our guests tonight, Mr. Willington Sekadde, Program Manager in charge of violence against children at Raising Voices. You're most welcome, Mr. Sekadde.
Thank you so much, Edmond, and good evening, listeners.
We're also joined by Ms. Hope Turyasingura, Consultant on Gender and Human Rights. You're most welcome, Madam Hope Turyasingura.
Thank you very much, Edmond.
Willington, how serious is domestic violence in Uganda?
Well, first of all, just like you've been mentioning, it's one of the fundamental challenges that we have both in homes and in communities where we all come from. Domestic violence, in its sense, is to do with the intimate relationships that we have with our spouse, with our children, and people we stay with. It's more around abuse of power in terms of if you are in a superior position, say you are the head of a home, or you are the man in this relationship, you take everything in your hands just because you've decided to do that without paying attention to other people's feelings and considerations. And domestic violence is such a big issue, a health issue, as well as an economic issue. So what you see in the media and what you also read in newspapers, as well as even from, for instance, if you looked at your neighbors or even within our own homes, in terms of how we treat and we relate with especially women and children in an unfair way, is what we would consider as domestic violence. It's such a big problem because when you look at the National Development Plan, if you look at the UDHS, the National Demographic Household Survey, the figures are extremely high. And I'm not talking about other smaller studies that have been done, say, by civil society organizations. I know that when you go and look at, say, reports that have been produced by organizations like Plan, organizations like CEDOVIP, the Center for Domestic Violence Prevention, WARNET, it will clearly show that it's such a big problem.
Is it going up or is it going down? You can also give us some figures to illustrate this. Madam Hope, do you have some figures?
Yeah, we have some figures. For instance, when Uganda Law Reform Commission was going to draft the law you've talked about, they conducted a study in the whole nation, and it was more than 68% of people who were experiencing domestic violence. And in most cases, you find that these people who are experiencing violence are women. And we also understand that when a woman is experiencing domestic violence, then even her children suffer. So you find that the problem of domestic violence is so high and it affects almost all of us. Therefore, we need to talk about it, and that's why we have the 16 days of activism and the media joining us in all this.
Maybe let's talk about those 16 days and then we'll burn it out later. Okay. What are you doing during the 16 days?
During the 16 days, this is a global campaign where the whole world comes out to talk about violence against women. And officially we started this campaign in 1991 in remembrance of the 14 engineering female students who were murdered in Canada, because a boy felt that he had missed an opportunity of doing that course in that university because females had been admitted. So he entered the lecture hall and shot people at random. At the end of the day, 14 female students died, 9 of them were injured, and 5 male students were also injured. So from that time, women felt that we needed to do something about it. That's when we started celebrating it. Then in the 16 days, we also look at HIV/AIDS, because 1st December is the World AIDS Day. And why look at HIV/AIDS during the 16 days? Because HIV/AIDS has been feminized. You know, you find that 61% of the people in sub-Saharan Africa who are infected with HIV/AIDS are women. And is it because they are promiscuous? No, because of the domestic violence and gender-based violence that we are talking about. When a woman is in a relationship which is abusive, she cannot negotiate for safe sex. She cannot be faithful, because we have a culture we talk about that that a man has a right to have multiple partners, and therefore you as a woman, you cannot say, I have heard that you have a concubine left, right and center, therefore tonight I'm not sleeping with you. She has to be forced to sleep with the man. Even if she wanted food at the table, especially for those of us who stay in trading centers, if you want food at the table, you must succumb to the man's demand, even if you know that he's promiscuous. So you find that many women are HIV positive, not because they are promiscuous, but because they are being raped in their own relationships. They are being defiled from age 0. We had a girl who was defiled at 3 months, and so on and so on. That's why you find that HIV/AIDS is one of the days of the 16 days of activism. Then we also have 6th December, which is also an international day to remember the women who are fighting for women's rights, the women's human rights defenders, because we find that even those women who are fighting for women's rights find themselves at risk, because people in our society don't think that women should enjoy their rights. Therefore, if you come out to talk about women's rights, you are making them rebels, you are making them impossible. So they look at you with a bad eye, and if they have something bad to do at you, they can do that. Therefore, that one is also a very important day for us. Then it will end on 10th December, and 10th December is an international day for human rights, and we are saying women are human beings entitled to all human rights like anybody else. Women's rights are human rights. That's why we have a whole wide of 16 days to be commemorated.
Interesting. Well, listeners, this is Spectrum Radio, and tonight the 16 days of activism. How can peace be sustained in our homes, considering the high cases of domestic violence? Our guests tonight, Mr. Willington Sekadde, Program Manager, Violence Against Children at Raising Voices, and Ms. Turyasingura, Consultant on Gender and Human Rights. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion.
Edmond, just one thing I wanted to add to Hope's contribution. There's also a component of preventing violence against children, because as you know...
Well, actually, I would like you to broaden it for us.
Exactly.
We're talking about domestic violence. It's not just gender-based violence. Can you broaden it for us there?
So, when you look at gender-based violence in its broad sense, whether physical, sexual, emotional...
No, let's start with domestic violence. It's not just against the spouse. It could be against the children. Well, can you define it for us, domestic violence?
I will not use the technical definitions here, because basically what I would like to raise is the fact that it's more of how intimately people relate. And it has to do with who owns which power and how you use those powers. Like, for instance, a home is often headed by a father, a man, and below there's a woman, a mother, and then the child. So how someone gets discriminated, how someone gets to be affected, intimidated, threatened, simply because of their gender, because of their age, because of the position that they hold in a setting, would qualify to be gender-based violence. And when you look at this campaign that we have, from peace in homes to peace in the nation or the world as well, we are looking at specifically violence against women because they are the most affected in the homes, as well as the children. And for the children, we are not only limiting it to homes, but also when it comes to the schools where they are going, when it comes to the communities, when we look at the different aspects, like how can children access justice in the forms of violence that they're experiencing. You know, when you look at the figures, they are so worrisome, where you have reports indicating that over 25%, say for sexual violence, that over 25% of children talked to in the UDH study, they said that their first sexual intercourse had to do with the use of force. That is a big figure, if those figures are anything to go by. So what you see us doing as civil society organizations, raising voices, Plan, Care, Who On It, and all the rest, and part of commemorating these 16 days of activism, as well as what you saw on the roundabouts, you see the police officers. The Uganda police is also actively involved this time around. You see them holding those placards. We are saying that everyone should come out and speak up against violence against women and children. Do something. What are you doing? We are challenging ourselves and challenging others in terms of what are we doing to address this. We cannot keep silent, and we need to do something. That's what the 16 days is all about.
Let's talk about the law. What recourse does one have in the law? A woman has been battered at home. Where do they go?
Okay, thank you very much. As we talk now, we have a number of laws in Uganda, and the most recent one is the Domestic Violence Act, which was passed in 2010 and it started being operationalized in 2011. This law is very clear. It defines for us all the abuses that happen in a domestic setting, and it is there to be used by everybody else who is in the domestic setting, be it a man, be it a woman, be it children, be it the domestic workers and other relatives that we stay with. So that law is aimed at punishing the perpetrators and giving relief and redress for those who are being abused in the domestic setting. And children come in very handy, because you find that if one woman is being battered, she has produced 12 children. So when she's battered and she's unable to cook food that night, all the children will not eat food. If she's battered and she spends a whole week without going to the garden, that means there is not going to be food security for the home. If she's beaten and the man abandons her, that means those children are not going to access education. We had a very bad case recently where a man went to the bar in Metiana, and he was challenged that by his friends who were drunkards like him, that he didn't have the capacity to produce twins. So in his head he thought that maybe this man who is challenging him is the father of the twins that are at his home. So he went straight home, he got a panga, he hacked to death 3 children, including that pair of twins, and he also wanted to kill this woman. But this woman survived with amputated arms. Now that woman is being supported by a daughter who is 10 years old. She's the one who feeds her, bathes her, takes her to the toilet, pats her when she's menstruating. All that is happening. You see that domestic violence affects women and children the most. So we need to talk about it, and that's why we talk about the 16 days of activism against violence against women and children. Because sometimes when we talk, people say, but even men experience violence. Yes, we are not saying that men don't experience violence. Actually, there is a study which was done by Professor Lilian Chirikubinza. She visited these women in prison, and these women are in prison because they committed a violent crime, and not because they intended to commit the violent crime, but because they had been sinned against for a long time.
They have been provoked.
They had been provoked. They were revenging. They had this battered woman syndrome, like you are battered for more than 20 years, physically, sexually, economically, and emotionally, and at the end of the day, you erupt like a volcano. So they are in prison because they either killed their husbands or whatever. But when people hear about them, they say, but these days women are terrible. No. The issue that Willington has talked about is the power. You who has power in your home, in your relationship, how are you using that power? You should use that power to make sure that you live in peace and harmony with everybody else under your control, but not being a terrorist in the home. But terrorism in the home is killing us.
The things you hear these days. Well, let's talk about causes. Do we know what causes this? Is it alcoholism? Is it what is it?
Well, quite often when you ask such a question, the most immediate people will point to things like poverty, they would point to things like alcoholism, and they have a right to, to perceive it like that. Others will even say that it's part of our culture. Every time I come out to talk about child rights issues, even my former teachers call in and say, Willington, were you not beaten? If you had not been beaten, would you be on Radio 1 or elsewhere? Well, unfortunately, it's the subjects that I failed that the teachers actually happen to call in. But away from that, if we step back, to challenge ourselves, what are the core root causes of violence against children, against women? Now, is it true that it's only the under-resourced families where we find violence? Is it true that people who are not, say, in the middle class or in the elite class,
who never went to school,
or who never went to school, so that we attribute it, say, to
answer
poverty?
it for us.
This is something that I'm throwing out there.
No, answer it. Is it the poor men and drunkards or do people beat their women in Kololo and Nakasero?
Seriously, my answer would be...
The rich also cry? Talk to us.
No, seriously.
The rich also cry. You said it.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with being poor or being rich. It's about the decisions that we make in terms of how we would like, like for instance, how do you want to be with your wife, with your partner, with your girlfriend?
Let's first talk about the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a poor man's thing? Is it?
No, it's cross-cutting. You'll find it among
some rich men beat their wives.
Even the and it's not just about the beating.
And then they go home, they take off their tie and they beat their woman. Do they do that?
They do lots of things that
attacking the pride.
They do lots of things that actually would qualify to be called violence. What my grandfather does in deep village Chabwe, I'm very sure someone does it out there in Kololo. And my grandfather did not go to
school. Is that empirical? You've got evidence of this. Some women come out complaining.
You want to talk about that before?
Let's get the clarity on that. Because I don't might think as soon as you get money, stop being a batterer.
Yeah, for instance, recently I was in Oyama and I was meeting some officers. This officer said, you people, we are missing a point. We are targeting the peasants as if they are the only people who are experiencing this domestic violence. But the elite are dying. And he gave us an example. We had a retired reverend in Oyam who almost hacked his wife to death.
A reverend?
Today they are still in the
hospital.
That's it. That's what we are asking. So when we say it cuts across, it doesn't matter whether you are a Catholic, whether you are a Protestant, whether you are a Muslim, whether you are whatever. So it even doesn't matter whether you are educated. Actually, the educated are at more risk because for them they even fear to report. I was talking to some members of parliament. They said, Hope, my mother in the village can make an alarm and people come and rescue her. But imagine me and a whole honorable making an alarm. I have a constituency to protect. I have a job to protect. So for us, we die quietly.
The vice president complained about us.
And everybody was up in arms against her. Because the
from which country she came from.
And both men and women said, but she has ashamed us. How can she wash her dirty linen in public? When you are being punched or when you are being sexually abused, when you are being economically abused, they don't ask you whether you have a PhD, whether you have never gone to school. It is the same punch that lands on Hope with the masters that lands on my mother who has never gone to school. So everybody of us is a potential victim of domestic violence and gender-based violence.
Let's talk about the influence of culture on this. Does it matter which culture?
Culture matters so much because it is the culture that has created that inequality between men and women.
Let's talk about the cultures in Uganda. Which tribes are safer? If I wanted my daughter to get married to a man, and I wanted them to get married here, why should I ask them?
We live in a patriarchal society, and the whole of Uganda is patriarchal to the extent that male dominance is everywhere. Be it in Kanyakola, be it in Baganda, be it in northern Uganda. So you find some people saying, I will not get married to a Mchiga. But when you come here to Uganda, the Baganda says, okay, I will not get married to a northerner. Those people are terrible. But which tribe is it?
Even men from West Nile, let's look at the figures. Even men from West Nile, normally they are, really cool men.
Can have a cool man and any tribe can have a terrible man. There is no tribe that is specific that for it they are born violent. No, because violence is something that we learn from this world. It is a social misbehavior that we learn from the environment where we grow up.
Let's talk a little bit more about the cultures, and I'd like you to backdrop this for us against the past.
Yes.
What kind of cultural, stereotypes do you have that encourage men to beat their women, even when they were suits.
Even when I'm not just referring to the men and women, maybe let's go to the children perspective of it. By the way, I wanted to say that I wouldn't say that, you know, the safest culture is maybe being a Muganda simply because I want to marry your daughter. No. But when you look at where we're coming from, there are lots of things that have been happening for so many years, and we've grown up seeing. Like, for instance, we've always known that you must work hard, you know, to survive. And working hard also at times means being punished to appreciate work. So quite often when parents say, for instance, beat us, they don't intend to harm us, and the intention is not, you know, to
they don't want to spare the road.
Yeah, they just don't want to spare the road. But when it comes to children and how they perceive that, it's more of something that makes you more afraid, something that affects your concentration and even appreciating the learning. So we grow up knowing that, okay, there's no pain without gain. Parents do it, others do it, but for children that is perceived as violence. Parents call it disciplining, children call it
when it's
violence.
Excessive, it's bad. Let's talk about the women specifically. The specific points in culture that encourage women to beat their women, so they think they're doing the right thing.
There is this saying that when a man does not beat you, that means he doesn't love you.
Yes.
That beating is a sign of love.
God.
Have you ever heard it?
Well, it's commonplace. We hear quite a lot.
In Uganda here we have sayings like omusajja asajjalata.
Yes.
Omusajja tabuzibwa gyava. Omusajja tabalibwa nzaalo. All those sayings are meant to empower this man.
Let's get the explanation. A man can marry as many women as they want.
Yes.
A woman can come late in the night. You don't ask questions.
A man comes, even if it is wee hours of the morning, you are not supposed to ask where he's coming from. When he brings his children in, you are not supposed to ask where these children are coming from. They are his children, you know. In Itoyo they have omusajja tayangwa. You cannot say no to a man. All those are meant to abuse this woman, to show the woman that she doesn't have power.
Do you have solutions apart from the law? Can society provide some answers?
Yes, the solution is not only in the law. The law comes in later on when someone's arms have been amputated already, which cannot come back. So the power is within our hands, especially as parents now. It should begin in our homes. Like we are saying, from peace in the home to peace in the nation. If you are not peaceful at home, you don't expect your children to be peaceful when they go to school. Actually, when you see those children, when they are all playing in schools, they role play what they see, what their fathers and mothers do at home. You find a small basic thing. I'm the boss. You do this for me. You do this for me. You know, terrorizing others. So we must be
the child of a minister. So if you see the child of a minister beating another child, you know what happens at home.
You know what happens because they are role playing what they see at home.
You have to ask many questions. Well, this is Spectrum Radio, and we're going for a break. We'll be back to stay tuned.
Welcome to the MTN Service Center, sir.
Hey.
How can I help you?
We are here to buy MTN SIM cards.
Okay.
Meet my wife and my daughter and my son. This is my father, my mother and my cousin Sylvie.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Hey, I need even for my auntie piece. Hey, come close, auntie piece. Behind her is my mechanic and my newspaper vendor and my boss and the pastor.
Okay, sir.
This Christmas, buy an MTN SIM card to win free airtime for a year. Dial *188# to win. 250 winners will immediately be notified on SMS each day. Win free airtime for a year with MTN this Christmas. Terms and conditions apply.
And of course, there is my brother, my electrician, my plumber, and my baba's best friend's girlfriend.
MTN. Everywhere you go.
Excuse me, guys. Let me through, please.
Yes.
Check this guy. Goodness, dude, what are you doing? Get real.
Just move a little bit.
Man, what are you doing bringing a cow into the sitting room?
It's just for when I want milk.
Just what?
Just please move. Let it come and sit here.
What's wrong with this guy?
You cannot keep a cow in your home, but you can get the freshness of its milk straight from the farm into your home. Get Fresh Diary Milk for freshness straight from the farm every day. Fresh Diary, so fresh.
Discover the new invigorating taste of Red's Vodka Lemon. Red's Vodka Lemon. Reinvent the night. Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. The 16 days of activism against violence. How can peace be sustained in our homes considering the high cases of domestic violence? Our guest, Mr. Willington Sekadde, Program Manager of Violence Against Children at Raising Voices, that's an NGO, and Ms. Turyasingura. She's a consultant on gender and human rights. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Madam Hope, talk to us a little bit about the past. The figures that you're giving to us, are they going up or down? What used to happen in the past, and how did they end these problems, resolve them?
I don't think we have a claim on whether the figures are going down or up, because what we are seeing now is that formerly these issues never used to be talked about. It was don't wash your dirty linen in public, and people would keep quiet, they wouldn't report. But because now there is a lot of awareness going on, you go to church, you hear the same thing, you go to the mosque, you hear the same thing, you go to the communities, you hear the same thing. Now people are beginning to report. So we do believe that the rising of the cases that we are seeing is because there is a lot of awareness going on, and people have known where to report, and other people are ready to support them. So it used to happen even when you read the Bible. For those of you who read the Bible, there is a lot of domestic violence being mentioned in the Bible. But because by that time our mothers never had where to report, nobody wanted to listen to them. Even if they reported, they would say, the man has paid his cows, you go back, because we don't have a refund. So you would find that they would die in silence. But now these days we see that at least people can report. Both women and men can come out and report, and then that's why we are getting the figures. And leave alone the figures, because the literature says the figures we see is only 10% of what happens. Yes, so many things are still happening and are not yet reported. So we still need to do a lot at family level, at community level, to make sure that we send out prevention measures, and then the response side also does its work. That's when the law comes in. If the church tells you domestic violence is seen, the Muslim does the same, and the civil society does the same, and you continuously do it, then the law will catch up with you.
How to get out of this problem? What do you tell a man if you want to tell him that beating his wife is bad?
I think it's more of starting and continuing with this dialogue.
How bad is it? Explain to us. How bad is beating a man's wife? Some people think it's a good thing. It's not a good thing, I can affirm. But tell us, how do you tell a man who thinks it's a good thing?
Well, of course, it's not going to be easy that you will come and say, if you don't beat your wife, if you don't beat your children, then you do this and that. But it's more of starting and stimulating people to engage in this dialogue.
Now, let's forget about the campaign. Talk to us about the reality.
Yeah.
What is bad about a man beating a woman? Let's put it that way. How does it affect children? How does it affect society? Talk to us about
It's more about the feelings that I have. You know, it's more you, Edmond, asking me how bad is it for Willington to punch you. It's such a bad thing because at the end of the day, I wouldn't like to be punched the same way I would do it to you. And when you're going to talk to, say, a man who has traditionally been using this and looks at the only way of being with the wife, with the children, in terms of using force, it's not going to be that easy that you will immediately come and tell him stop.
Let's assume you will listen. Let's give the message. How does it affect the woman? How does it affect the child? How does it affect society?
It affects the society in the.
Let's talk about the children. She's avoiding a little bit of it, but talk to us about how does it beating a woman affect the children?
Affecting the children is, I think we've all been in homes and we've been like children. If we had to reflect back on our early childhood, how would it feel when you saw, say, your dad barking at your mom? Quite often you would also mentally be affected. You don't want that to happen. And in the work,
so it traumatizes the children.
Traumatizes you, and you
it also makes them think it is the right thing. When they grow up,
this is something that
it's a cycle.
So if I saw my dad beating my mother,
you think it's the mother?
It hurts me at that point of time. But when I also grow up and I'm in this relationship, and I remember, the way that my dad used to control my mom was by beating her, then I don't see anything wrong with that. I will continuously do the same thing. When you you see what is happening, say, for children in their schools, when they see the teacher using violence, they'll also, the big boys will do the same to the young boys. So it actually increases the cycle into bullying. Yeah, into bullying. So it happens, we tend to normalize it. It becomes normal. I see it being done, so I'll also do it. I don't see anything wrong with that. But it traumatizes the victims. It affects them mentally. It takes away their esteem, that someone actually does not feel confident even in the societies where they are, or even in any setting, be it a home setting where they actually exist.
Madam Hope, you spoke a little bit about men violence. Very briefly, women normally react against men because men have abused them in the first place. It's not normally sourced from the woman's side.
Yeah, and I looked at, I have read a book written by Professor Lilian Echirikubinza. It is about women's violent crime in Uganda, more sinned against than sinning. You find that most women in that book either committed that crime because they were revenging, they were retaliating, they were self-defending, and they had this syndrome which is called the battered woman syndrome, that after being abused for a long time, you have kept quiet, or you've run away and your parents have sent you back. You feel enough is enough, and at the end of the day, you feel you should do something, because in case you don't do it, it is you who is going to die. And in the process, they have ended up committing this violent crime of killing people, and they are in prisons. So you find that, yes, some women, I don't deny that we have some women who can be really aggressive.
But those are really few.
They are very rare. Yeah, in most cases, they are very rare. They have a starting point. Because you see, when a man cheats on you, he doesn't expect you to get aggrieved, you know, to get pain. But for you, even mere suspicion that you talked to Willington, he's going to ask you, what were you talking to Willington? So you find that...
Especially if he laughs out loud and he's watching. Go on.
Yes.
Go on, madam.
So you find that, yes, women experience a lot of domestic violence, and you are asking how it affects women. It affects women mentally, it affects women's reproductive health rights, because they cannot even decide when to have sex, how to have sex, when to become pregnant and when not to become pregnant. You find a woman producing year in, year out, and at the end of the day, even the man abandons her with the 10 children, and he goes for another woman, and then this woman with her 10 children are going to suffer without the basic needs. You find it is quite a lot, it is quite alarming, and we must address it.
And what kind of society do you get from men who beat their women at home? How does it play out in society?
When you look at men who beat their women, you find that it has a multiplier effect. I have a poem which says, "Father, I want to be just like you. When you talk, I listen. When you act, I observe." So you find that if you are a man and you have 10 sons and 5 daughters, and they see what you are doing, they do believe, since you are the powers that are in the house, what you are doing is the right thing. So we end up having a multiplier effect of domestic violence, and that's why we have a violent community. Because most of us have grown up in abusive relationships. We don't know what peace means. We don't know how being in a harmonious relationship looks like, how sweet it is. Therefore, we have this multiplier effect of the cycle of domestic violence, left, right, and center.
Talk to us about the sweetness of a non-violent relationship.
A non-violent relationship, even when I'm talking about it, I feel it. It is so sweet that even when it comes to time for going to the shower, you go together. When it comes to time for having the meals, you go to the meal, you have the meals together. You laugh together. You sing together. You love each other and you respect each other, so that everything in a home is so peaceful and everything is good for everybody of you. The woman will be happy, and once the woman is happy, the whole body of us is happy. And even if you demanded for goods at any time,
for the man,
yes,
even for the man, and he goes home, he wants to rest his head against a pillar of thorn.
Yes, somebody is there to give you a shoulder to lean on. I say, darling, welcome back. How has been the day? But if you are passing each other like buses, even the buses hoot, and the driver say, yeah, I have seen you. But you find people, someone say, you eat quickly before your father comes. And when they hear him, the car coming, they say, you want to bed. So
the terrorist has come home.
The terrorist has come. You know? Some people say,
Osama bin Laden.
They even nickname you and you don't know Osama. has come. Chibwetere has come. You don't know that they are talking about you. So that kind of hostile environment is not good for any one of us.
Right.
You need a conducive environment where you look forward for going home. When it comes to fight, you say, I have to run home to find my sweetheart. Yes.
And you said some men and women, they pass each other like buses on that.
I tell you, even buses hoot to each other, and the drivers share a smile and
they like each other with traffic policemen ahead.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the law. Is the law adequate to deal with domestic violence?
No, the law is not adequate to deal with domestic violence. We need a multi-sectoral approach to deal with domestic violence. Actually, when Uganda Law Reform Commission conducted a study, they said, yes, we need the law, but we also need extra-legal measures. And what are those extra-legal measures? We need to raise awareness in the communities so that parents start raising their children differently, so that men and women start behaving differently, so that in the future we have a conducive environment where all of us can enjoy our rights. Then the churches have to do the same in terms of raising awareness. The schools where our children are going, so that when they leave this conducive environment at home, they don't find a hostile environment at school, because it would influence them again. Therefore, the schools must raise children in a non-violent way. Beating is not a solution to any problem. If I failed a mathematical sum and whatever, and you beat me, that wouldn't put the math into my head. You know, we need to find alternative ways of...
make you work harder.
No, it doesn't. I used to
say spare the rod and spoil the child.
No, I used to tell people, and up to now I still tell people that I was beaten every day because of mathematics, and up to now I don't have a PhD in mathematics. If it was to put sense in me, I would be having a PhD in mathematics. I used to be beaten because I used to make a lot of noise in class, but up to today I make noise even at 50. So beating is not a solution to anything.
Right.
We need to help people learn. If I make noise in class, how does it affect my learning? If I don't concentrate and learn how they calculate this, how does it affect my career in the future? Instead of beating me. So we don't need violence at any level of our growing up. So we need to make sure that we find alternative means of resolving conflict. Conflict is okay, conflict is normal, but how do you handle that conflict so that it doesn't create more conflict?
Right. And Willington, you think, what's your view on the law? Does that cover all the sectors it's supposed to cover?
Well, I think there's lots of progress in terms of the law. Like, for instance, when you look at the Domestic Violence Act and the Children Act, the Domestic Violence Act of 2010 and the Children Act. But just like Hope is saying, you know, for instance, how many people out there, you know, when you look at the percentage, are aware of the opportunities in the judicial system? How many, even when they get to know, can actually report? You know, when you look at a child who has been defiled, what are the chances that they will get, say, police form 3? And what are the chances that, for instance, they will go and do medical examination and get people to testify in court? So the law is there, and there are so many laws. We could spend the entire hour talking about them. But I think it's more around also concentrating around the smaller things that we can do in our own settings. Like, for instance, how do we orient our children when we are bringing them up? How do we communicate with our children? Because even with our wives and our partners, it's more to do with the communication. You have a problem, you can't openly come out to talk about it. You keep it to yourself. You have the anger, and you know, you pass it on to others. You can't talk. So how do we start talking to children and talking to our wives when we have, say, challenges, like when it comes to children who are in schools? How can teachers discipline them differently instead of using, say, corporal punishment and the cane that actually makes them fear and even hate the subject and hate this teacher? So those are some of the other things that we should also, in a small way, start being engaged in.
And when someone gets hit, where do they go? They go to the police station straight?
No, they don't go to the police station straight, because when Uganda Law Reform Commission conducted that study, people suggested where they normally go. We have the LCs, because the LCs are nearer to the people, they speak the same language, and it is not all that time consuming, and sometimes even the money that is paid there is very little. Then some of them go to friends and relatives. For instance, if you are married in church. We have ladies of honors, we have best men on our sides. So in case you have such a problem, those are the people where yes, you go to your matron and the man goes to the best man, and then you sit and discuss these issues. Even when the Bible is very clear, it doesn't say go to the law immediately. It says the two of you must sit and discuss. If the two of you have failed, bring in a third party. If the third party has failed, go to religious leaders. But if all those levels have failed, then you treat your brother as you would treat a pagan. Go to the law. Okay? So people first of all exploit other means before they run to the law, because even accessing the law is not as easy as we talk about it.
Well, you've read your Bible, obviously. Let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight, the 16 days of activism against violence. How can peace be sustained in our homes? Is considering the high cases of domestic violence. Our number is 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Spectrum, hello. Good evening, sir. Your name? Yes, Mr. Ore.
First of all, I want to thank those in the studio. But it's very, very good that you are advocating for non-violence in the home. But how do we package our message, especially to the two parties? Because the price of organization, which is a group of only men who are the champions of violence. Now, creating harmony means a lot of things. Communication is one of the issues when you are tackling issues of harmony. Now, in most homes, I think what brings problem is communication. Now, when you bring other things like culture and so on, and also interference from external forces. Now, I will also go back to HIV, where it was also attributed to a lot of things. But there is also a problem of people who are also fighting those today. I look at it in a way that some people have started promoting contrary to what started in 1980s.
What are they promoting?
Like today, people are saying circumcised.
Become metallic.
And they are now putting it in the way that it's as if you circumcise. And then
all right, okay.
So these are some of the places.
Okay. We'll hear from the experts about how to package that message. Thank you, Mr. Our Spectrum. How do we package the message? Yes, Willington.
Yeah, I think Were has a strong point to raise here. If we are going to talk
okay,
about...
let's hear from Spectrum. Hello? Yes, madam, your name?
I'd like to congratulate my colleagues in the studio about violence. One of the issues about violence is an issue to do with power. And unless we get men, women, and children in this country to understand that power can be exercised differently, we'll still have violent families, we'll have violent relationships, we'll have violent schools, we'll have violence in politics. It's a way in which the people who feel powerful can exercise it. And the previous caller talked about enabling men. Research shows that most of our societies are really patriarchal, and they exert a lot of power to men and boys who exercise that power in different ways, including normalizing discrimination of women and girls, as well as exercising the power through violence. And unless we go back to the basics to say how best can we understand power and share it, because power is elastic. Men, women, boys, girls, anybody can exercise their power, and it's so elastic that you can all share that power equally. So unless we get back to those basics, we have this conversation. I like the fact that Hope and the colleagues talked about families, engaging families, how we raise our children, how we don't normalize violence in the schools, in the homes, and even more importantly, breaking that cycle. Some of us go to families that are violent, but you can still break that cycle, because what is good for a woman is good for a man. What is good for a boy is good for a girl. And unless we get back to that basic, not being threatened with power and engaging with it, we will have violent societies. Our hospitals will be full, because many cases that go to hospitals so. Are cases that actually the root cause is violence, but people don't want to talk about it. Many hours are lost in the cultural sector. People cannot speak. And when people are having very sad relationships, we're seeing very many intimate partner relationships that are very sad because of the fear of violence. And the way now in the new world where we're seeing more women that are powerful and more men that are struggling to understand the new woman, they resort to the use of violence to control the women. Thank you very much.
Salome, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, could you switch off your radio? Walk away from it. Spectrum, hello? Hello? Okay. Come again? Can you switch off your radio, my friend? Yes, your name?
Peter, my name?
Yes, Peter.
Yeah, my view is just in regards to judgment around the background of women and the man that is coming out to be violent because of the fact that it's challenged with that. And in my view, it actually is a concern of those people who have got no background to violence, but turn out to have, for example, a partner who has got a violent character. In that sense, I would then come to the circumstances of work and the current pressures of the economy that are turning out to be the influence to the new character of this woman and new man in today's world, which is challenging, and we think that it is mostly to do with the pressures at the moment that do have impact.
Okay. Peter, thank you very much. You made your point very, very clearly. Spectrum, hello.
Hello?
Yes, your name?
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Your name?
Yes. I'm calling from my parents.
Your name again?
Enos.
Enos, yes.
And thank you very much for having this video. And I thank them for the messages. Today as I was coming to work, I policemen and those domestic violence. But I want to emphasize the point that Mr. had mentioned about it. It should not be only put on men. I always tell my colleagues at work, especially, that domestic violence, even women leave.
Okay.
But I want to talk about the packaging, just some little icing on it, that even schools, the package will go to the schools and the engaged families, so that the domestic violence cannot, it should be phased out. The way that we are trying to fight corruption. And thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, let's hear from you. Hope, what do you think? Let's hear from you, Hope. Your response to these callers. How should we package the message?
Okay, thank you very much, our listeners and those of you who have really called in for the good questions and the good responses. Yeah, it is always challenging that whenever we are talking about domestic violence, the emphasis is normally saying that men could be the major perpetrators and women the major victims, and actually not being apologetic, it is the reality on the ground.
Give us the figures. 98% of the violence is by men. Give us some figures.
Yes, more than 90% of the violence is committed by men, and it is basically because of what Solomon Akawes has said, the issue of power. You see, from day one when a boy child is born, they attach a lot of power on that boy, and they attach less value on the girl child. So even through the socialization process, this boy is being groomed to be told that yes, you have power, but he's not being told that power is good and can be shared and can be used in a positive way to benefit everybody else in your family. Because first of all, who is his role model? That's I have to go back to that. Boys have failed to get role models to groom them into non-violent men, because most of our men, I grew up in a home where my father was really very abusive. abusive. I have interfaced with so many people who are abusive. And if we don't have role models for our boys to emulate, look at, and learn from them, then we shall continuously have violence. Violence is a learned behavior. None of us is ever born violent. Because even as women, if you are given a hostile environment, you can also be violent. Therefore, we need to look at the environment in which we are socializing children, both boys and girls. They need to begin respecting each other from an early age. Not saying, you girl, if I have beaten you, why did you go there? And then when the boy comes crying, you say, boys don't cry. You know, you are a man. You are not supposed to cry. Then this boy grows up when they are really hardcore, you know. You have this emotion that you are supposed to let go, but your parents are saying don't let go because you are a man, and then it makes you aggressive. So we need to change those styles of parenting so that we begin parenting our children in a positive way, where rights are being respected from the family level. It's very unfortunate that when we talk about gender-based violence, yes, men are in the lead. And it is in literature, research has been done. Even if you don't need even to do research. If we sampled all of us who are here in this studio,
you might get no results.
You know?
Go on, madam. Anyhow, go on. 10 people seated at the bar.
Yes. When you sample them and you ask them where they grew up from, what the situation was like, you are likely to find the same things that we are talking about here. So without being defensive or offensive, let's learn to live harmoniously. Because even when God was creating us, He never said, go you women and terrorize men, or you men go and terrorize women. He said, go and live in peace and enjoy the fruits of the world. Isn't it? There is no way you can enjoy the fruits of the world. There is no way you can live as a temple of God. There is no way you can live as an image of God when your ears are being cut off, when you are being patched and the uterus is being removed from your womb, and all that. You know?
And violence against women is not just beating. Sometimes if you marry another woman, that's
so many forms.
Talk to us about, give us your own reactions in a minute.
Quickly, one, I thank all the callers, and one thing that I picked out here is the fact that, you know, all of us have the potential to be at risk of violence. But just like Hope is saying, the statistics are clear that you'll find the national figures showing that more than 60% for the women, yet it comes down to around 11% for the men. And when it comes to the children, it's even worse off because it's more than 80%. But one of the things that I would want to pick from Were and Enos is the fact that we definitely need to engage men as partners. So we cannot do this, we cannot achieve it by pointing fingers, but this is a fact on the ground. What I also picked from what they all contributed is the fact that they all seem to acknowledge that violence is wrong, and we all need to do something to start addressing it, just like other major issues like corruption, and that was a good thing from all the callers.
Right.
Yeah.
And finally, Hope, you say, you can't tell by looking at a man that he beats his woman. He doesn't. It's not about income or anything.
It's not about income. It's not about taking alcohol. It's not being about a Catholic or a Protestant